So Gary Kubiak here is the president of our Tea Party in Utica, the Southeast Michigan 912 Tea Party, and we're just individual people like you who have a particular topic that we got interested in. This is about refugee resettlement specific to Michigan. It's part of a nationwide, just grassroots pockets of resistance. There's people like us that go around in most of the states that talk about this, and it's a pretty significant topic. This is not. This is actually quite sober. There are people who really want to change America by changing its people. We're not against individual immigrants, individual refugees. As an institution is what we're concerned about, and to understand who's behind the institution, who's behind the industry, what the implications are, and whether or not it should be a top-of-mind topic for us as individuals, as precinct delegates, as supporters of candidates. It's really, really something for you to think about. So our goal tonight is to answer your questions. We've got a good group. If you have questions, we'll certainly stop and answer them. First thing we're going to do is just recognize that we're associated with a woman named Ann Corcoran. You're going to see her in the video. She's just a grassroots person. There's no organization there. She's just had the experience in her town 8 years ago. She has a blog. Some of us read it pretty regularly, and she's the one that we met through a Skype call. And some of you remember Trevor Loudon. Anybody see Trevor Loudon here? Yeah. Bill actually gave him a ride in his car. Thank you, Bill. And Gary Kubiak and I got a chance to bring Trevor to 13 or 14 different destinations with other people's help. So Trevor Loudon introduced us to a group of other people, associates of Trevor and other people that have been doing work on the Muslim Brotherhood. The USA Transnational Report is their area. And then in the middle, we've got the Center for Security Policy. Frank Gaffney and Jim Simpson are also people that we work with. All that means is the data that we've learned comes from these people. And I think the easiest way to get started is to show you just the first video. This is Ann Corcoran. It's just 4 minutes, and it's better than me talking is for you to listen to Ann, and then we'll pick it up from there.
It's been over 7 years since a church group from another state brought a couple hundred refugees to the rural county where I live. I wanted to know, how could they do this? What was the governmental process that allowed the resettlement of refugees to a county ill-prepared to assimilate them? Employment opportunities were scarce. The health department was not familiar with illnesses and mental health problems of people who came from parts of the third world. The school system was not prepared to teach large numbers of students who didn't speak English, and subsidized housing was scarce. I wanted to know who gave permission for what amounted to a dropping off of needy people in our county seat. So I began my research and posted everything I learned to a blog, Refugee Resettlement Watch, so that others might know what I learned about a federal program that is 35 years old this year. In summary, I discovered that the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees was choosing most of our refugees. It's under the influence of a powerful Muslim supremacist group called the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Not surprisingly, a large number of U.S.-bound refugees are coming from countries with large numbers of people who hate us, including Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq, and soon from Syria, just to name a few. The U.S. State Department then distributes the refugees to 9 major federal contractors, 6 of which are so-called religious charities, but all are largely funded from the U.S. Treasury. They're not passing the plate on Sundays for the $1 billion price tag for the resettlement. And that figure does not include the extensive welfare benefits refugees receive. The refugees are then sent to over 190 cities and towns in the U.S. where the 9 major contractors support 350 subcontractors. The refugees receive help from the subcontractor for up to 6 months, and the subcontractor then submits paperwork to admit the relatives of the first group. As the years have passed, I've become increasingly alarmed by the percentage of problematic Muslim refugees admitted and distributed around the U.S. through this program. By the way, the Refugee Resettlement Program is not the only one used for legally admitting Muslims, but it is one of the most important. Many are forming cities within cities. Perhaps you know one where you live, where mosques are being built to consolidate, train, and promote a growing American Muslim population and its Islamic supremacist doctrine called Sharia. This process of Muslim colonization is called the Hijra. Muhammad told his followers to migrate and spread Islam in order to dominate all the lands of the world. He said they were obliged to do so, and that's exactly what they were doing Now, with the help and support of the UN, the U.S. State Department, and the Christian and Jewish groups assigned to seed them throughout the country, your tax dollars pay for it all. I've written this little book, Refugee Resettlement and the Hijra to America, so that you will know what is happening to us and what we can do about it. We only need to look to a troubled Europe to see the path ahead for America if we can't stop this migration and stop it soon. There's no reason on earth that we should have brought over 100,000 Somalis and another 100,000 Iraqi Muslims to America. Soon we will be resettling Syrian Muslims in large numbers. The UN at the moment has over 10,000 in a pipeline destined for our towns. The FBI told Congress recently that they cannot be properly screened. If you don't help counter the Hijra, we are, in my opinion, doomed. Over time, this migration will be more devastating to your children and grandchildren and to our country than any terrorist attack could ever be. Learn more at Refugee Resettlement Watch and SecureFreedom.org.
Says a lot. That is Ann Corcoran. If you do only one thing from our conversation tonight, please, Refugee Resettlement Watch is her blog. If you're not ready to take other kinds of action that we're going to recommend at the end, just follow her for a while. That's what we did, and that's why we do what we do. And again, there's small groups of us in different states. We're coordinated by the Center for Security Policy to the extent we're coordinated, but she's just a really important person. And, okay, this is a federal program. It is legal immigration. It is expensive to the tune of $1 billion every year just for the function of picking up people in a foreign country, moving them by air into an American city, and distributing them out into, as she mentioned, 190 cities, and taking care of those people for a period of a few months, and then connecting them to state welfare, which goes on indefinitely. $1 billion just for moving people. However, because they have an R next to their name, meaning refugee, they immediately get $6 billion a year worth of federal aid in terms of food stamps, housing, Medicaid, etc. After 5 years, 75% of these people are still on food stamps. 56% are still on Medicaid. We're going to provide these slides to Ken, and so hopefully you can see them up close if you follow the website where Ken's going to put this stuff.
Question, Dick.
Yes.
$6 billion. Is that money paid by the states or is that money paid by the federal government?
This is the federal government. So this is federal. It's right. This is taxpayer money from all over. You'll see a little later on. Some of these groups sound like they're charitable groups. This is federal tax money, whether you're associated with any one of those religious organizations or not. Federal tax money to pick up people, just like this is the UPS business, except the packages are human beings. They're picked up and they're moved into the United States and they're placed into cities and towns and then moved out into smaller cities and towns. And you'll find out that we have matching funds coming from the state and state welfare, which is just pretty much unaudited, undefined. Let's go ahead, Gary. It's expensive and it's secretive. This is the ultimate central planning activity. It comes from the United Nations to the State Department to 9 organizations. These 9 organizations are like businesses. It would be like 9 different UPS companies who move the bodies into the state. The state legislatures don't know who's coming. They don't know who came. The mayors, the sheriffs, the congressman, Trey Gowdy, who's the head of the Immigration Committee in the House, did not know they were going to be moving refugees into Spartanburg, South Carolina, his district. He found out after they were already planned. He wrote a letter to Senator Kerry and really has never gotten a good set of answers. The point is, it's a secret, and that's on purpose. And now, because of what's going on in the world in the last 5 years or longer in terms of just destabilized countries, it's unsafe. We have unvettable and people who are absolutely not assimilating people. So we have unvettable people who then come here and do not assimilate. This is not the traditional immigration that is the reason that we're here, because of a brave grandfather or uncle that came to America for freedom. These people are coming to America either on a mission or for the welfare, because every one of them is getting welfare. In addition to that, so again, starts at the UN, goes to the State Department, goes to 9 organizations who put people out into the country. And they have 350 subcontractors. In the state of Michigan, we've got 10 or 12 subcontractors who work specifically in our cities and towns. We're going to show you the detail of that in just a bit. Okay, Gary. This is the gentleman who's in charge of the UN. He's from Portugal. Portugal doesn't take many refugees. He's got 130,000 Syrian refugees he wants to place. So far, his country has taken 23. So you'll find that this is a big part of the UN. How many people are aware of the fact that the UN was largely the creation of the left after the war, and that the UN is largely day-to-day operation managed by 57 countries in the Organization for Islamic Cooperation. So it's a largely, we pay for a lot. We pay the lion's share of all of this. Very good. However, there are people in the world running the UN who are leftists and Islamists, and that's part of the problem. Gary, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Also, I'd like to, in Australia, if you ain't going to assimilate to them, they don't want you to.
You're exactly right.
Here, we assimilate to them.
That's a great point. We are actually losing our association with our core values, so we can, yeah, that's a great point. We do not require assimilation. In fact, we're bringing people into the country who, if they assimilate, are subject to penalties, including death. They are not allowed to assimilate, and we're bringing them in. Excellent point. So this has been going on for a long time, actually, but it got really structured under Obama. Obama has put this on steroids. In fact, a year ago in November of 2014, he formed the committee, the Task Force on New Americans. This is for illegal and legal immigration. The notion is, this is the open borders notion. This is the notion that the President of the United States, you might recognize Valerie Jarrett. You might not recognize the lady who used to be the head of La Raza. Her name is Cecilia Munoz. They're changing America by changing its people. And what you're going to hear in a minute is that the state that is leading the way, the state that is changing more than any other state per capita, is Michigan. Okay? So changing America by changing the people, bringing the third world in. This is a mandated top-down. These people meet. They have a conference call every 6 weeks. They have a quarterly report. I've been on the phone call surreptitiously listening in, and I can tell you for a fact, this is all about moving people into America, lining them up for welfare, and registering them to vote, getting them to be citizens. If you are a refugee, you have no legal cases to deal with. You don't have to go to court. You're a refugee, you get welfare, and you're on a fast track for citizenship, and of course voting. And of course, if you've been living off of a government that pays you to live here, you're going to vote for big government. So this is a very calculated and devious problem, and it's way, way, way underway. It's happening all around us. These are the 9 agencies that are in the UPS business. You can see, for example, this is the percentage of their annual revenue that comes from the taxpayer. The Catholic bishops lead the way. 98% of the Catholic bishops' work on refugee resettlement comes from the federal treasury, from the taxpayers. This is not well-meaning Catholics, some of them in this room probably, who are putting money into the Catholic Church. This is all the taxpayers are paying for this, whether they've ever been inside a Catholic church or not. 97% of the money for the Lutheran Services folks is coming from the taxpayer to pick up bodies and moving them into America. You'll notice Episcopalian, you'll notice there's a Jewish group, etc. These groups are in business. The business is moving bodies, and they get paid per head. Thank you. Okay. In Michigan, we've got a number of them functioning. We have their headquarters are listed. Dearborn is where the International Rescue Organization moves people. We live out in Oakland and Macomb County. We've got the Lutheran Services in Troy, and we've got the Catholic bishops in Clinton Township. You'll see Southeast Michigan, the southern part of Michigan, is the center point for all of this, and these organizations are making money. They get paid per head. By the way, these organizations are also on record asking the federal government to bring in not 10,000 Syrians, but 100,000 Syrians and 200,000 refugees before Obama leaves office. That means these people make so much money that they retain to keep the industry going that they can pay for lobbyists who can lobby for more business, which is more people. So despite the fact that we're changing America, culture, security issues are part of it, they're still moving in the bodies, and that's really a good part of what I'm going to talk about is the numbers. If you are a refugee, by definition, you get all of this on day one. So this just happens to be from a website. You get a furnished home, you get help with rent, you get health care, you get job placement assistance, you get English language classes, you get social services. This is all federal supported, and at the end you get signed up for state welfare. So this is a welfare upon welfare situation, and that's, like I said earlier, our grandparents came here for an opportunity, for freedom. There was no welfare. This is just the opposite. People are coming here just like the people are going, making their way through Europe to get to the best welfare country, which happens to be Germany right now. That's what's going on. Okay. All right, so in the Midwest, we're a very big attraction for this industry, and you can see a density of interest there, because we have the kind of work that refugees can do. By the way, let's remember that there are people behind this, not just the left, not just the Islamists, but cheap labor. So these people are coming in here because they are displacing American workers and working at lower wages. So unfortunately, the Chamber of Commerce and candidates supported by the Chamber of Commerce are directly involved in this industry. They're the quiet partner. They're not contractually part of it, but they are part of it to keep the wages low. So for example, I think in December, 300,000 Americans lost their jobs, native-born. 300,000 foreign-born workers found work, and that work was at lower wages and so on. So for a place like Michigan, this is a really significant recognition. We have 94 million people in the country who are not working, who could work, who want to work, who've given up, and yet we're bringing in hundreds of thousands of illegal and legal refugees. Again, this is a legal one. The organizations are called voluntary agencies, but they're not really voluntary organizations. They're contractors for the federal government. The CEO for the Lutheran Services business in Michigan makes $455,000 a year. And 8 people on their tax form for the state of Michigan alone, 8 people on their 990 tax form make between $125,000 and $389,000. So this is a big business, and it's a growth industry. The thing that we have to deal with in Michigan is even if you're put on a plane and you're delivered in Arkansas, you can pick up and move to Michigan. And we have secondary migration big time into Michigan. We have no numbers for the secondary migration. We don't know. All we know, and the numbers I'm going to show you, are just initial arrivals. They land at an airport in Michigan, but we don't know the number of secondary migration people who come to Michigan and apply for welfare. And of course, we have chain migration. Once you're placed, you can go back online and fill out a form and say, I'd like you to bring my family. And these agencies do because they get paid per person. All right, so let's go on, Gary. What do we know? The law does not require the federal government or the Catholic bishops or the Lutheran services. I'm going to use those names because they are the prominent people. I was raised a Catholic. Some of you may be Lutheran. It's just a fact we have to come to grips with. The Catholic Church has made $2 billion off of this program alone in 8 years. $2 billion moving bodies. All right, so people have been moved into Michigan every year from 2008 to 2015. We didn't know they were coming. The only people that knew they were coming were those agencies, the Catholic bishops, Lutheran services, and the others. They moved them into their hub cities. 27,851 refugees came to Michigan in 8 years. Nobody knew they were coming. So your congressman, your mayor, your sheriff doesn't know today. It's all from a central planning, globalist perspective that it's happening. Oakland County's had 9,900, Macomb County, etc. This is where they're placed. So this part of Michigan is where they're being placed. Again, all those people, the state of Michigan learned after they came. We've actually spoken indirectly to the gentleman who's in charge of refugees in Michigan. His name is Al Horn. He works for the governor. He claims that they get updated 30 days after the arrival. They don't even know in Lansing who's coming until 30 days after. That means they're already in the school system, they're already in a mailing address, they're already in an apartment, they're already on your block. know it, Gary. All right, so in Michigan, in 1 year, we came in, we're typically fourth absolutely at 4,000, average of 4,000 in fiscal 2014. However, the states above us have much bigger populations, much bigger. California is 4 times bigger than Michigan. So we are by far the #1 refugee receiving state in the country per capita. So if the goal is to change America by changing its people, Michigan is leading the way. Michigan is being changed more rapidly than any other city. We should all be aware of that. We should all figure out what that means and understand that up to this point it's been a secret, and this is what we're doing tonight. We're talking the numbers. These numbers come out of the federal database. The law in 1980 requires that the federal government update the database after they come, not before. So we have a researcher. She lives in the middle part of Michigan. We don't even know her. We've never met her. She just does the research for us. She knows how to get into the federal database, and she pulls out the numbers for us, and we report them. In one fiscal year, 2014, 4,006 people from 22 different countries came into Michigan under this legal program, using taxpayer money, using the services of the Lutheran and the Catholics and the other people involved in that. Notice we've got a large community of Somalis in Michigan that year. Somalis just don't assimilate. They don't want to assimilate. They want to stay to themselves. And unfortunately, in Minnesota, where they have 100,000 Somalis in 96 different cities, they have been a major source of radicalized people. If you watch the news, you know that Somali people who have gone back to the Middle East, etc., are part of a radicalization problem. Of course, we've taken lots of people from Iraq in Michigan, and many of those people in the early days were Chaldeans, and they live where we live, and they've assimilated, and they love being in America. Unfortunately, in the last 2 and 3 years, the percentage of Christians coming out of Iraq is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% at most. So we're bringing in primarily Sunni Muslims when we say Iraq now. When we say Syria, 97, 99% Sunni Muslims. As this gentleman said, you can count the Christians on this hand. Okay, Gary. What happens, well, this is just a study that our friend did for us. In one 9-month period, 2,000 refugees were moved into the state of Michigan secretly. They went into those hub cities like Troy and Dearborn and Ann Arbor. From there, they were moved within a 50 to 100-mile radius. They got apartments, they got mailing addresses, they got subsidized housing, whatever. But they're in our communities. I live in Rochester Hill. Gary lives in Shelby Township. We have a lot of friends who live in Troy and Sterling Heights. These people are moving into our communities without the mayors, the sheriffs knowing about it. The goal is to place them, to put them into an apartment. By the way, the agencies like the Lutheran folks and the Catholic folks are connected to the real estate industry. They're on the boards of people who have houses. I mean, people who have apartments for rent. They're involved in the industry. There's people making money taking care of the refugees, placing the refugees, putting them in their buildings, it's getting them health care, etc. However, these are still people that have become our neighbors without any knowledge on our part. This is interesting. We asked the state of Michigan to tell us what was going on, and they told us nothing's going on. We have no plans. We have nothing for you. 5 weeks later, we wrote something called a Freedom of Information request, which means they would have broken a federal law if they didn't answer the question. All of a sudden, we got 10 contracts. The data wasn't there. 5 weeks later, the data was there. We got 10 pieces of data that I'm going to show you in a minute. But one of the things we learned is that in 2015, which ended last September, for that year before that, remember, Syria has been an unstable country for 5 years. There is no way to vet Syrians. There's no records. The country is in disarray. So it's great that after Paris, our governor and 29 or 30 other ones said, oh, this is not safe. They're not vettable. We don't want any more Syrians. It's nice that they said that in the middle of November. However, they weren't vettable last year, and somehow under Freedom of Information, we learned the big secret that 180 Syrians were placed in Michigan last year. 180 Syrians, they weren't vettable. When Paris came up, they're not vettable, stop. Well, they weren't vettable before that. We still moved 74 Syrians into Michigan, into Oakland Township, 180 for the entire state. This is a problem. It's unsafe. It's still unsafe. Let's go more Gary. We also learned now, this is the new data, so from first quarter, which would be October, November, and December, the country took in 674 refugees from Syria, unvettable. How many Christians? Actually, this gentleman was very close. In this particular period, of the 674, only 6 identified themselves as not Muslims. So 668 came into America from Syria. It's unvettable. They're declaring themselves as Muslims. Therefore, 98% of them are Sunni Muslims, which means they're Sharia adherent, which has a lot of implications you're going to see in a few minutes when we show you another video. So this is going on, and since the governor said stop, it's good he said it, but they're still coming. Despite him saying they're not coming, we'll show you that in a second. Okay, so let's just talk about Syrian refugees. In the last 5 years, America has taken 2,761, Michigan 287 into Michigan, number 1 in the country per capita. Since Paris, we brought in 602 Syrians into America, and that was your point right here. This gentleman's right. There's 2, in that period, only 2 are Christians. So this is after the governor said stop. 30 governors said stop. The leftist engine doing the work of Islam is moving 602 of them despite the governor saying we're not doing this anymore. Well, guess what? We are. That shows you how out of control the globalists are in America. They're driving people here despite what anybody says. In Canada, this is really scary. Canada had an election. They put a liberal person in power. Just since November, Canada has moved 21,672 Syrians into Canada, and they've dispersed them into 200 towns. Canada, that's right next door, right? Yeah, we're right here. Our border with Canada is basically wide open. So the reason I'm showing that is just the notion. Somebody is going to push the button in America between now and Obama leaving. And that button is going to open the floodgates. They want 100,000 Syrians. If they can move 21,000 in 3 months into Canada, they can move 21,000 into America when they decide to do it. So that's the other reason why we need to understand what's going on. We need to be prepared. We need to figure out what can we do to make ourselves safe. Is there anything the states can do to push back, which we're going to talk about. The other key message is this is not just, we say Syrian, but Syrian has a broad meaning now because there's a big growth industry creating Syrian passports. So you can be from Afghanistan, you can be from the Sudan, you can be from Libya, and you can get a passport. All of a sudden, everybody there are people who want you because you're Syrian, when you're really not Syrian as well. So this is just, again, this is new data. This is just for the 3 months. This is the 4 months. This is October, November, December, January. Michigan has picked up a grand total of 758 refugees, 93 from Syria. The 93 is not a big number, but it shows you the engine is there. And in the months of the spring and the summer, we've been told unofficially the gates are going to open very, very wide, and Michigan is going to get the 5,000 or 10,000 that they've kind of signed up for. Let's go one more slide. So in this, okay, we know this is important, and you'll see in more detail on the video. We have the cities and towns in Michigan listed, just as an example. Grand Rapids has taken 131 just this year, first quarter, and they're from all these different countries. So we have the data because of our researcher. We can tell you how many people came in from Afghanistan or any other place, and you'll see that Syria is across about 9 different cities. So for example, Troy has taken in 13 folks from Syria. I live next to Troy. Gary lives next to Troy. Okay? So we've got that data. It's available. This was the secret information we got into Freedom of Information. We said, Al Horn, you work for the governor. Who's coming to Michigan next year? Why can't you tell us? Al said, I have no plans. Freedom of Information, Al delivered 10 plans. The 10 plans are being run by these people who are being paid by the head. This is different parts of the world. This would be the Middle East. So we're going to get 4,000. This is the capacity to bring in 4,060 more refugees between now and next September into Michigan, 2,500 from the Middle East. This is the capacity for the Lutheran Church and the Catholic Church to move bodies. This says nothing about the capacity for the Michigan taxpayer who has a budget to deal with this. This says nothing about the school districts. This says nothing about the hospitals. This says nothing about the poor, the elderly, the handicapped who were supposed to be getting Medicaid and other services who would be moved aside to deal with this. This is just the capacity for the UPS people to bring in bodies. Know any veterans groups? We're available. We'd love to start talking to veterans groups. This is very important for them. People are being moved aside. We know for a fact in the state of Maine, people who are eligible for public housing are being moved out, put at the end of the list, so that the refugees can be placed in public housing. We know that for a fact. We were looking for people who can help us get into mosques, get into these agencies, because we need to understand, people need to hear firsthand what motivates people. What are they doing? People in Lansing need to hear exactly what's going on. They need to see the numbers and hear the story, but they need to hear the personal stories. There are native-born Americans who are being moved aside so that these waves can keep coming in. And remember, they want 100,000 Syrians and 200,000 refugees. The industry is hungry for more. They get paid per head, and they don't seem to care about the veterans or the people that need care. Think about the black community. The black community in America who votes 95, 98% for the left is being royally, pardon the expression, royally screwed by these people who want to bring in people who are going to take the low-level jobs, etc. These are people, so you've got native-born workers of all kinds who are being displaced, and these people are being brought in droves. Okay.
I think the next one's the video.
Okay, so we're going to keep going. We got a 3-minute video now, and now we're going to move into another phase. Please pay attention to this 3-minute video. This is the heavy-duty part.
Comprehensive study based on interviews with thousands of Muslims in 39 countries. It reported that in countries like Afghanistan, Egypt, and Jordan, the vast majority of Muslims surveyed, between 79 to 86%, believe that those who leave the Muslim faith should be executed. Do you know anyone who has left their faith? Do you think they should be executed? Do you think that that's a radical belief? If we were to take the average from all the Muslims surveyed around the world, we end up with an average of 27% who believe that apostates should be executed. 27% of those surveyed, that equals 237 million people. Did you know that 39% of all Muslims in the countries surveyed believe that honor killings can be a justifiable punishment for a woman who has had pre- or extramarital sex? Do you think that's a radical belief? That radical belief is held by over 345 million Muslims. These studies paint a picture of an Islamic world that is increasingly out of step with the modern world. When it comes to support for terrorism and jihad, these are the numbers for young Muslims aged 18 to 29 in Western countries. 42% of French Muslims, 35% of British Muslims, and 26% of American Muslims believe suicide bombings against non-Muslims can be justified. This is the next generation of Muslim speaking. A majority of Muslims surveyed, 53%, said they want Sharia or Islamic law to be the law of the land in Muslim majority countries. Of those who said they want Sharia to be the law of the land, over 52% said they support whippings and cutting off of hands of thieves. This comes to about 281 million people. Do you think that's a radical belief? And 51% say they're in favor of stoning spouses if they're unfaithful, which equals 289 million people. Of course, not every Muslim believes in these things, but hundreds of millions do. The numbers are right here for all to see.
Okay, so she threw around a lot of numbers there, 250 million, 300 million, 200 million. And you think of the population of the United States, what, 310 million people. So she's talking about a very large group of people that believe in these radical views, Sharia, submission. So that's what we're going to talk about in the second half of the presentation as far as security aspects and what's their end game. Well, Muhammad says, I charge you with what Allah has charged me, to assemble, to listen, to obey, to immigrate, and to wage jihad for the sake of Allah. So migration is part of civilized jihad. So we've all seen what's going on in Europe since late last fall into now. And this is a ferry unloading of refugees, immigrants from the Middle East and Northern Africa coming onto the shores of Greece and then heading up into Europe. And some statistics have said that 75% of these refugees coming in are young men between the ages of 18 and 50. And as you can see here, backpacks, nice Levi's, maybe they're short on clothes, but to me they don't look like they're malnourished at all. They look like they're somewhat healthy. But I'm sure there's some sad stories within that mass, but overall, I think Europe's got a problem. And we all, if you've heard what happened on New Year's Eve in Europe, across Europe, it just didn't happen in Germany, but in Finland, in Sweden, in Austria, where they went to celebrate for New Year's Eve. The town square, like being downtown Detroit around the Renaissance Center or around Cobo Hall. These people were attacked. Girls were attacked and raped, boyfriends beat up, husbands beat up, molested. It was just carnage that was happening, and this just wasn't randomly 5 or 10 men going at it. These were thousands of men attacking the people in the town square, and these were the immigrants or the refugees. But they think that's okay because that's their culture. Migrant invasion will reach over 10 million, warns German minister. And this is the march into Europe. That is I believe is a well-coordinated attack on Europe. It's not the Trojan horse attack. It's the open borders, here we come, and I think it was organized, and ISIS said it's time to go and invade Europe and let's take it over. So you see this large migration, and do they want to assimilate or do they want the handout? And as Dick had mentioned, they're headed to Germany, most of them, because that's where most of the handouts they can get. That's where they can get most of their benefits. But they're heading up to Finland and Austria. Greece is a major problem. And of course, France and Britain, they've had a problem for years. Angela Merkel, for the almost 1 million that have come into her country, you know, remember the old German war movie, Show Me Your Papers? Well, they've given out papers, but now they've lost track of 600,000 of them. They don't know where they're at. Where have they gone? You know, they're everywhere. You know, they don't want to report to the authorities. They want to be on their own. Islam's sexual abuses in Sweden and the cultural challenge. 1 out of 4 Sweden women now will be raped. You just don't go walk out to the grocery store at night in any parts of Europe. Germany, Sweden, Finland, Austria, Sweden, they've had a major problem because they've been one of those countries that have brought in these people and were thinking that they were doing good. But now that the numbers have reversed, where their numbers are taking over their culture, they are on go, and they're just behaving like they would naturally in their own part of the country. Muslim refugees bring pregnant little girls as child brides to Europe. That's what Muhammad did. That was one of Muhammad's thinking, is that you can marry up to 4 women, plus you can marry little girls too. So Europe has a problem now. When they bring these child brides, do they look at it as a legal marriage, or do they look at that man as a pedophile? They don't know what to do with these people now. And it's under their laws that they can marry these young girls. Wives with benefits. Muhammad here again says you can marry up to 4 wives. Why can you marry up to 4 wives? To populate. To outpopulate the person that is the person that has grown up in that country, that is a citizen of that country. They're going to outpopulate you. And that is one of their goals, is to outpopulate that country and then slowly but surely change the culture, not assimilate, and then you submit to Islam. This is something brand new that we just threw in. And you think of, what is a refugee? Are these guys refugees? Here they even got a selfie stick. They came on the shores of Greece, and they're all looking, they look like pretty good, pretty healthy guys, pretty strong men too. Here they are marching to the shores of Europe. Here again, backpacks, nice, decent clothes. I mean, look at this guy. This guy could be walking in downtown Detroit, and you wouldn't think twice about him, right? But here are the real refugees, the Christians that are forming in the camps in Germany and across Europe, and especially in the Syrian camps. If you're Christian and they know it, they're coming after you. You're going to get the heck beat out of you. You're going to be thrown out of that camp, or you may not even want to go to those camps because you're Christian. So these are the people that are in real fear of their life. These are the people we should be helping. And this lady here, I just went to this, I've started going to a new church, Kensington Church, and they showed this little 12-minute video, and they're trying to help these people out, the Girls of Pokot. It's in Kenya. Now, we mentioned that you can marry, Muslim men can marry young girls, 12 years old, 10 years old, 13 years old. These girls, this story is about these girls escaping their own families because they're afraid to being married off to these men who they don't know, they don't love them, their father marries them off. He may get a couple goats or some extra food for the exchange of his daughter to this strange man. And these young women, not even women, young girls are escaping their families and headed to these Christian camps in Kenya. And then they're being protected, and then they're being led to Jesus Christ. So they're being saved. They see that there's a different world out there. So these are the people these are refugees. These are the people we should be helping. But yet, as Dick completely explained, we are flying in the enemy here, the enemy within. So what about the Middle East? Are they doing their part to help out? Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar. Nothing. They're not taking any of them. 0. Why does Saudi Arabia not want any? Well, they say they're worried about the security aspect. There might be a terrorist amongst them. No kidding. But really, what they want is that these countries want those refugees to go into Europe and eventually into the United States, because what Ann Corcoran said, that's Hijra, H-I-J-R-A. They want their people to invade Europe and eventually here to take over those countries. That's the main objective. That's what Muhammad wanted 1,400 years ago. Yes, sir?
Didn't Saudi Arabia set up these mass camps of 10 cities that are sitting empty.
Yeah.
Why'd they do that?
Well, that is for the pilgrimage from Mecca to Medina. And then they set up these camps for all the visitors or people that come in for that pilgrimage. And yes, they're air-conditioned, they're well-maintained, it's beautiful, but those camps go vacant now. But we know why even their own people know that they don't want to go there, they want to go to Europe and finish the game off, finish the end objective off. This is from the Heritage Foundation, and this is a timeline of terrorist attacks and plots that have been uncovered prior to attack. So you see here at 9/11, of course, we lost 3,000 people, and in the red is where attacks were launched. Now you can see all the numbers as we start getting closer to 2015, 2016, we're starting to get a lot more activity. So even though the FBI is doing their job in stopping attacks, we've had the Philly cop shooter, San Bernardino, and so on, where they've been hitting us. This is taken, and we're going to get into this too a little bit later too, from Representative McCall, terror threat snapshot just in February of this year. 33% of homegrown jihadist cases since 9/11 have happened in the last year. So it's accelerating. You know, the jihad, the attacks on us. And here's our Dearborn Heights man that, thank God, the FBI got this guy, because he was ammoed up and he said he was going to go to one of the mega churches in Detroit and just shoot as many bullets as he could. And luckily they caught this guy. And why is he raising the number one finger? Well, we'll get into that too and tell you what that symbol means. Hamtramck, does anybody know what happened in the Hamtramck the last election? Well, it's called Shariaville, an article that was written by Leo Holman, who once lived in the Michigan area here. So it's Muslim-controlled city council. And I think when I looked up, there's, Hamtramck's 2 square miles. And they've got 5 Islamic centers or mosques inside Hamtramck. And their call to prayer is blasted out on the speakers 5 times a day.
Well, they did get away with that, but,
Oh, it's happening. Who eats Chobani yogurt? Commercial. We got to pay for this presentation. So does anybody eat Chobani yogurt?
not anymore.
All right, very good. All right. This man, the founder and owner of Chobani Yogurt in Idaho, he went to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, and he's encouraging businesses like UPS, MasterCard, and so on to bring in more refugees. His company in Idaho, which is America's largest yogurt plant, about a third of his employees are refugees from the Refugee Resettlement Program. Muslims. And he gives them minimum wage. He's got to have interpreters on site because they speak many different languages. But he's encouraging American businesses to let's bring in more of these people. It's a good thing. You can get cheap labor. But we know his end game too. You know, it's to change America. And like you said, ma'am, why can't those third of his employees be American workers? I'm sure there's people in Idaho that would love that job with benefits, even though it might be low wage, but it's maybe a future for those people. It's a starting point.
Gary?
Yes, sir.
Kind of wrap this up.
Yeah, I'm going to fly through.
We could, and one question, I'd really like to know what it's costing in terms of Michigan dole benefits to one of these people. We know it's about a $7 billion tab from the federal government. What is it for us per refugee in Michigan? I'd want to know that. And secondly, if there's anything that we can do of practical nature.
Okay, we're going to get to that. Here, let's go through just a couple slides here. Go ahead, Dick. FBI Director James Comey has come out a couple times and said you cannot vet the refugees. You just can't do it. Go ahead, Dick. This was just a couple weeks ago. Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper. Islamic State could infiltrate U.S. through migrants fleeing Syria. And he works for the Obama administration. That was pretty bold. Go ahead, Dick. Representative McCall, one of the good guys, saying the same thing. He's the Homeland Security. Welcoming America. They just had these are the people that fight to bring in the refugees. Go ahead, Dick. And then we just had the Catholic Charities in Macomb, had 102 officials across Michigan sign on to the massive migration. And we've got names of our representatives and dignitaries. So I'm going to let Dick finish it up, and we've just got 3 more slides here, then we'll wrap it up. Thank you, Bill.
We don't know how much money is being spent in Michigan. We're working with legislators. We're going to talk about that. How could it be that the Department of Health and Human Services in the state cannot identify how much money is being spent on the refugees and not being spent on native-born? So it's a very powerful question. We're going to work with people, invite you to work with people so we can get that answer. We don't know the answer. Let's just talk about some things that are going underway. The state of Michigan and the Republican Party has a state committee. You probably all know that. That's, I think, 98 people who get together. They're the top of the precinct delegate tree. They met on the 5th and 6th, and this is why it's important to have the right precinct delegates. So they unanimously supported a resolution to thank the governor for speaking out, but to put teeth into keeping us safe and keeping the moratorium on unvettable refugees going on in Michigan, but with real teeth. Congratulations to the state committee. Resolution. Now, the resolution is so powerful for our safety that some of us would have thought that this would have been a major news item. The state of Michigan Republican Party did the right thing, so I want you to think through that. We're still working with the state party. We actually have a copy of the resolution, and we're going to leave a copy behind with this organization, and we're going to ask you to think about adopting a similar resolution as a group. So it's a major step forward for the Republican Party, but the teeth is the rest of the story. One more, Gary. This is a little bit more confusing. Senator Patrick Kolbeck is a courageous man. He introduced concurrent resolution number 92. All it said was, ISIS is there. ISIS is here in America. We want to have a resolution for the House and the Senate to approve. Thank you, Governor, and let's keep ISIS out of Michigan. Let's continue to keep unvettable refugees out of the state of Michigan. This gentleman and I went to Lansing. We were invited by the gentleman over here who's the head of the committee and the head of the Senate, Arlen Meekhoff. You know that name, remember that name. Arlen did Senator Kolbeck a favor and had a hearing. Senator Kolbeck called Gary and I. We went up there. We were given 6 minutes. We spoke as fast as we could. We never mentioned the word Islam. We presented the facts on who's coming to Michigan and asked the question about the economics of it. At this point, the political theater erupted around Gary and myself and Senator Kolbeck. The 3 people on the left-hand side are Republicans. They did nothing but set up and allow this political theater to happen. The 2 gentlemen over here are Democrats. The gentleman on the top is from Dearborn, Detroit. His name is Morris Hood. He accused the senator of being a racist, and therefore Gary and I being racist because we had a resolution that said ISIS is dangerous. Let's keep unvettable refugees from failed states out of Michigan. That's all it said. It mentioned ISIS. That's why you see the ISIS flag. After Gary and I sat down, there were a sequence of 12 or 15 people who opposed the resolution. They included Dawood Walid, who's the head of CARE. CARE is a front group for the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood has been identified by Pete Hoekstra in an article recently, and by Saudi Arabia and the United Kingdom as a terrorist organization. The Muslim Brotherhood is what funds ISIS. They are an internationally known terrorist organization, and they visit the White House and the State Department regularly. Their front group in Michigan is called CARE. The gentleman in the picture stood up. He sat 2 seats over from me. Me and Gary sat 2 seats away from the Muslim Brotherhood. They are alive and well. They walk around in Michigan. They have tremendous power in Lansing. Sadly, they have power in the Republican Party. And when he finished speaking, Catholic Charities spoke against the resolution, or supported the resolution be voted down, and there were 2 Jewish rabbis who also spoke. Basically, we were identified as people who hate immigrants and racists. The press was there. The article is at MLive. It's dated January the 26th. And the racist is in the headline. This is the way the game works. It's political theater. Senator Meekhoff did not have the courage to tell Senator Hood that he was out of line by calling Senator Colbeck a racist, but he did have the courage to tell the press that, oh my God, we're not going to take this up again, we're done. So it was a show hearing. They're not going to pick it up. It's a step back for us. It's a message to intimidate us, and it was picked up by the newspaper. So if you're going to do what we're doing, we are the enemy, we are haters, and we are racist. That's the way the game is played, and we need to understand that that is political theater in the state of Michigan. And we also need to understand the power of the Catholic Church in Michigan, the Michigan Catholic Conference, and the Muslim Brotherhood in the form of CARE, specifically shot down American Law for American Courts 4 years ago. They're still very, very active in the state of Michigan. However, we're not done. There's another resolution that is in the House. In addition to that, we have a very courageous set of people that we have talked to, led by Representative Jim Runstad in the House. Tim Kelly is working with him, Lee Chatfield, Thomas Hooker, Gary Glenn, Pete Lucido, Joel Johnson, Mike Weber, and others are open to this conversation that we're having with you tonight. There's a potential for legislation to come out of this group under Runstad, and the legislation could be heard. There could be a hearing. We would want you to know if there's a hearing. We would need your help to be at a hearing. So we're going to hand out cards for our website, Refugee Resettlement Monitor Michigan, and we'll post anything there and send messages to you directly.
Thank you, Gary. We've sent people to testify before, and we undoubtedly have courageous people who would do it again.
Excellent. We're going to need your help. These laws are based on what's happening in other states. There are states that are trying to push back against this incredible invasion by the globalists. So, for example, there's wording that could be in legislation about stop keeping it a secret. Tell us who's coming. Tell us ahead of time. Why would we give state money to the Catholic Church to run foster care if they're going to screw around with us on refugee resettlement? You have to tell us what's going on. How about no state welfare if the state doesn't know you're coming in, or if Oakland County or Macomb County or Washtenaw County or Wayne County, if they don't know they're coming, maybe you're not going to get state welfare.
There you go. That'd be a plan.
How about additional law enforcement by the state police getting involved in vetting people from questionable areas? That's a law that's being introduced in the state of Florida. How about just the fact that how much is enough? If Michigan is #1 per capita, what is the capacity that we have as a state to absorb financially and culturally this rate of change? And finally, just the notion of there are communities that we've already been placed under this program. For example, there are massive numbers where we live of Chaldeans. Why should the Chaldean communities be reinvaded by the Sunnis to build mosques next to their community when we rescued them from the Middle East, we brought them here, now we're going to bring Muslims in to build a mosque in their community? That almost happened in Sterling Heights. So this is a very active topic. It's going to require a lot of courageous people at the grassroots level. And then this is the last thing. So what can people do as individuals? They can follow the story, look at our website. Individual organizations have identified with us by supporting as a named organization the resolution that came out of the state. So we're going to leave a resolution behind with you. If you have a board meeting, you want to send us an email, we'll put your name up there. So for example, the 14th Congressional District, as a congressional district, reviewed the resolution, they adopted it, they're on our chart. Tomorrow night we're going to be in Auburn, Michigan, which is near Midland. Same conversation. We're going to leave a resolution behind with them as well. We want to be able to tell our representatives that groups of Republicans, groups of Tea Party, the Republican women's clubs have been very active with us. We want to be able to tell them that people are really concerned about secure lives for their families and their children in Michigan.